Just about finished with the 63 non-reverb Deluxe. Got the new power cable installed. So the safety ground is longer than the hot and neutral. It's going to chassis here. For those who've asked, yes, in a new amp, especially an amp with an aluminum chassis, I will drill a hole and put in a machine nut and the proper screws and all that. On these old Fenders with a steel, they were soldered to the chassis, so that's what I do. So I've got the hot and the negative. This is a two-prong outlet. The negative opening is wider than the positive on the other side, so has the correct polarity. If you're to plug a DC supply in for a pedal, the neutral goes to the otherwise unused ground switch without the polarity cap, and one of the primaries of the power transformer is connected there. The hot goes from here to the inmost connection on the fuse, and the other connection on the fuse, the sleeve, let's call it that, goes to the power switch, which has the other primary. That is modern safety code applied to a 1963 Fender. Here you can see the new 3-watt 470 ohm screen grid resistors. You can also see that this amp does not have grid stoppers. Most Deluxes have a grid stopper mounted from pin 1 to pin 5. This amp does not. It seems to be okay without them, so I have not put them in place. In fact, this amp has pins 8 and 1 both connected to ground, though pin 1 is not used with 6v6s. You saw me rebuild the bias board the other day, and you can see here it's got new 100 ohm half-watt fusible resistors added from each side of the heater supply to ground here. Some Fenders had them going to chassis here. That just makes them very difficult to replace because you've got to get out the chassis iron. This way, if you need to replace them, you just go to a standard eyelet. And the old physical center tap is taped off. It's disconnected from the chassis ground. That way, if there is a short in a tube, these resistors will burn and fuse open rather than burning up the power supply, the power transformer rather, which is a very expensive thing to do. I'd rather lose 2 5-cent resistors than lose the original power transformer. Maybe that's just me. As to the rest of the amp, other than replacing the remaining electrolytic capacitors, I've not made any, and cleaning that area of the board that was so full of yuck. You saw that in the previous video. The rest of it is untouched. And you also saw in the previous video that I cleaned all the stuff there on the brass control plate and put everything back and tightened everything up. While the amp comes up to operating condition, the knob for the volume on the normal channel, the set screw was in fact stripped out and was free spinning, and the knob could not be tightened. I put the smallest amount of wood glue in there and put the set screw back, and it seems to have done the trick for now. That's a non-destructive way to fix it. Maybe someone out there has got a way to add some kind of epoxy and redo the slots for the little set screw. That's beyond what I do, and I'm just going to do no harm. That knob's going to stay in place until someone wants to give it a more permanent fix. Of the tubes it came in with, the output tubes were bad. It has a new pair of Electro-Harmonic 6v6 GTs, and it has the Telefunken branded, I believe it's really a JJ GZ34, and the output tubes are biased about 56% idle dissipation. The preamp tubes it came in with were 2 GEs and an RCA for the 12AX7s. Of those, one of the GEs was very noisy, very microphonic, so I put it in V3, which is equivalent to V5 in the reverb version. So it's just being used for the tremolo. So it has original old tubes for V1 and V2, which are in the signal path. And it has the old, I don't remember if it's GE or RCA 12AT7 in the phase inverter. So here's the normal channel. This is with a Telecaster, so there may be some 60 cycle hum. Listen past that. There's an interesting artifact if I'm too close to the tubes and transformers with this guitar. There's a crackle. But that's just proximity to the amp. So that's the normal channel. And here's the vibrato channel with the repaired input jack. Now this channel has the bright cap right here. Can you see that? That's something I remove in a lot of the Deluxe reverbs, because between that high frequency emphasis and the emphasis that you get through the reverb circuit, it can be a bit bright with a lot of guitars, particularly a Telecaster. With this circuit, I find it sounds quite nice. And if the owner wants, I can disconnect one end of it and leave it in the amp. But I think it sounds really nice and balanced. So my inclination is to leave it. And let me hook up the vibrato. Don't want to hook up the foot switch just for this. It's in a box, all bundled up. It works, I tested it. And I can't find one of my little RCA dummy plugs, so this will work just fine. There's no ticking from the tremolo, so I've not had to do the de-ticking trick with the capacitor. So it just sounds phenomenal. Has almost zero noise floor. I have not done any tricks, not had to do anything crazy. I just gave it a clean, recapped it properly. You guys saw all those steps in agonizing detail. Cleaned the tube sockets. I guess I didn't show that. That's really just soaking them in isopropyl and then kind of wicking out all the yuck onto some bits of paper towel and letting them evaporate thoroughly. There's no real magic. You know, I did put some bear trap retainers, some Beltons on the output tubes and the rectifier just to make this thing hold up better in a combo, less prone to vibrational problems or things knocking around. It just didn't need a lot beyond what I've already done. It sounds phenomenal. In fact, I go so far as to say this is one of the best 60s Fenders I've ever played, as far as a representation of its type. I have not heard it with its original speaker yet. That's coming up next for me. This was through my shop cab because I know what this speaker sounds like. It's an ET65 paired with a Veteran 30. If an amp sounds bad with this, there's something wrong with the amp. But this thing is just everything you could want a Deluxe to do except for reverb. It is so good, in fact, that I'm going to go through the circuit and measure every resistor and every voltage. Just a second, get that out of the way, and see if there's anything unique about this compared to other Deluxes from the era, because I have played quite a few. I've played certainly many dozens, I think many hundreds of 60s Fenders at this point, and this one stands out. So if there's one little thing that's a little bit different, I want to know what that is. Now, this is the AA763, not the AB763. So maybe what I'm hearing is just that increased harmonic, what's the best way to put this for non-techs? Has an intentionally unbalanced phase inverter. So there's going to be some harmonic distortion generated there. The tail resistor and the phase inverter is a little bit different. There's not a lot that's different between this circuit and the AB763, but there's just enough, and maybe that's making the difference. This is just a gem, and I'll be sad to see it go. So you will get a chance to hear this with its speaker. It's got the old original Oxford, which seems to be in good shape. You'll get a chance to hear this properly recorded by a better player than myself. Until then, thanks for watching.